Ronan Voss served Malin Voss divorce papers in front of his mistress, his family, and the company executives gathered to celebrate what he believed was his promotion. Not at their kitchen table, not inside a private lawyer's office, but inside the golden banquet hall of Orison Vale Works, under the company logo, while his father watched from the head table and his mistress smiled beside him like she had already become his future. Malin Voss, 34-year-old quiet wife and secret majority owner of Orison Vale Works, stood near the far end of the family table because her own husband had approved a seating plan that moved her away from him. Ronan Voss, 37-year-old newly announced executive candidate and son of the company's public chairman, held a cream envelope filled with divorce papers he had already signed. Oric Voss, 63-year-old public chairman of Orison Vale Works and Ronan's father, stood behind him like the company still belonged to the Voss family. Vesa Rook, 33-year-old executive image strategist and Ronan's mistress, lifted her champagne glass like the promotion, the man, and the company were already hers. Ronan swallowed once, then said, "Open it, Malin. Everyone should understand what tonight means." Malin looked at the envelope, then at the champagne glass in Vesa's hand. "You brought divorce papers to your promotion night." Before Ronan could answer, Oric stepped forward. "Because tonight is about Ronan's future," Oric said, "and you were never built for the level of power this family carries." Malin looked at Ronan. "Is that what you believe?" Ronan looked away for only a second. Then he said, "My father is right." Vesa raised her glass higher. "To Ronan," she said, "a man brave enough to choose the future over comfort." One by one, his family lifted their glasses. Malin did not scream. She did not beg. She only removed her wedding ring and placed it beside the unsigned divorce papers. Because Ronan did not know the truth. He did not know Malin secretly owned the company he thought his father controlled. He did not know Oric had lost control of Orison Vale Works years earlier after burying debts that almost destroyed the business. He did not know Malin had saved the company through Silver Key Holdings, protected his father's public name, and quietly kept the Voss family empire standing. He did not know his promotion night was only a public celebration before final board confirmation. And he did not know that the same woman he had humiliated under the company logo had the legal authority to stop that confirmation before he ever sat in the executive chair. Ronan thought divorcing Malin in public made him powerful, but it only removed him from the last protection standing between him and ruin. The next morning, at his first executive confirmation meeting, Ronan arrived wearing his new silver leadership pin, ready to take the seat he believed his father had prepared for him. Then the boardroom doors opened. Malin was already seated at the head of the table. A folder marked Silver Key Holdings, Majority Control Authority, sat in front of her. Ronan froze. Malin looked at him and said, "Last night, you toasted your mistress with the family who helped erase me. This morning, I decide whether you have a future in the company you thought was yours. Some betrayals do not destroy the quiet person immediately. They wake up the part of them that was patient, powerful, and waiting for the right room to reveal the truth. Stay with this story until the end, because the wife Ronan discarded is the same woman holding the ownership documents, audit files, and board authority that can take away his promotion, his mistress, his family protection, and his future. If you love stories where betrayal meets consequence, subscribe now. And before we begin, comment justice if you believe a quiet woman should never be mistaken for a powerless one. The call came at 5:12 in the morning, before the sun touched the glass walls of Orison Vale Works. If the supplier contract failed before noon, 300 warehouse workers would lose their paid hours for the week. The board would call it a delay. The executives would call it a clerical issue. But Malin Voss, 34, Ronan Voss's quiet wife, and the secret majority owner of Orison Vale Works through Silver Key Holdings, knew what it really was. It was the kind of mistake powerful men buried until ordinary people paid for it. Rain tapped against the tall lobby windows when Malin entered through the side door instead of the grand front entrance. She wore a simple dark coat and carried a plain leather folder. No diamonds, no assistants, no sign that the company truly answered to her through Silver Key Holdings, the private investment firm she had inherited and controlled. Dale Mercer, 52, the night security guard who had watched Orison Vale Works for 16 years, looked up from his desk and smiled with tired relief. "Morning, Mrs. Voss. You're earlier than the executives again." Malin gave him a gentle smile, though her eyes were already on the elevator. "Someone has to make sure the day doesn't begin with yesterday's problems." Dale chuckled, not knowing how true that was. Upstairs, the executive floor was only half lit. Cleaning carts stood near the walls. The expensive offices looked peaceful, but inside the main conference room, panic sat at the table. Selka Myron, 46, the finance director of Orison Vale Works and one of the few senior officers who knew Silver Key could authorize emergency reserves, stood over a stack of papers. Her face was pale. "Oric's office marked the supplier penalty clause as waived," Selka said. "It was. If we don't correct it this morning, Northline Supply can cancel the shipment." Malin opened her folder calmly. Oric Voss, 63, Ronan's father and the public chairman of Orison Vale Works, had tried to hide many things over the years: failed expansions, reckless debt, private guarantees he had no right to make. This was smaller than those disasters, but it could still hurt hundreds of workers. Malin pulled out a marked copy of the contract. Clause 18 protects us if we send written reassurance before 8:00 a.m. Call Northline's legal office. Tell them Orison will honor the original payment schedule. I'll authorize the reserve release through Silver Key, but the board language must describe it as a corrected payment assurance, not a bailout. Selka stared at her. "You already knew which clause." Malin's mouth curved faintly. "I read what people sign before they pretend it cannot hurt anyone." For the next hour, Malin worked like a surgeon. She changed 3 lines in the reassurance letter. She approved the reserve transfer through the Silver Key Reserve Authority. She told Selka which board language to use so the correction would not trigger market panic or supplier distrust. By 6:41, the shipment was saved. No camera caught it, no executive thanked her, no one would clap at the dinner that night because 300 workers still had wages. And that was how Malin had lived for 7 years. Behind every speech Ronan gave, there had been a page she fixed. Behind every crisis Oric survived, there had been a document she quietly corrected. Behind every public victory of the Voss family, there had been Malin standing where no one looked. As Selka left to make the final call, Malin's eyes drifted to the rain on the windows, and memory pulled her backward. 5 years earlier, Aveline Key, 71, Malin's late aunt and the founder of Silver Key Holdings, had called Malin to a private hospital room. Aveline's body had been weak, but her voice still carried the sharp calm of a woman who had built wealth without asking loud men for permission. The loudest men in a room, Aveline had told her, are often standing on foundations built by someone quiet. Aveline had discovered that Orison Vale Works was drowning because Oric had expanded too fast and lied too long. The company was days away from defaulting on debt tied to warehouses, pensions, and supplier contracts. After Aveline died, Malin inherited Silver Key Holdings. She could have exposed Oric. She could have let the Voss name collapse. Instead, she used Silver Key to buy the controlling shares quietly during restructuring. The agreement allowed Oric to remain public chairman for stability, but it gave Silver Key final authority over major executive appointments, emergency financing, and governance reviews. Only the board, Silver Key's legal team, and a small number of senior officers knew the truth. Ronan was never told, because Auric begged for time and Malin still believed love could make Mercy safe. She told herself she was saving employees. She told herself she was protecting Ronan from shame. She told herself love sometimes meant carrying the truth until people were strong enough to face it. Now she was no longer sure Ronan wanted truth at all. At 7:18, the elevator opened. Ronan Voss, 37, Malin's husband and Auric's ambitious son, walked in adjusting his silver watch. His suit was perfect. His smile was already rehearsed. "Dad said today is finally the day," Ronan said. "After tonight, everyone will know I'm the future of this company." Malin looked at him with tired tenderness. "Tonight is an announcement, Ronan. The board still has to confirm executive authority tomorrow." Ronan waved that away. "Dad said the board won't fight family succession." Malin studied him. "Leadership is not the chair you sit in. It's what survives because you cared enough to protect it." Ronan barely listened. "That sounds nice," he said, checking his reflection in the glass wall, "but tonight isn't about feelings, it's about power." He handed her his promotion speech like she was his assistant. "Can you make this sound better? Not too emotional, I need it strong." Malin read the first page. One line sat there like a warning. "My father built this company, and now I will inherit what is mine." For a moment, her fingers went still. Then she crossed it out and wrote beneath it, "A company is not inherited by blood, it is earned by responsibility." Ronan glanced at the edit and laughed. "That's why I keep you around. You make simple things sound deep." Malin did not answer. She only handed the pages back. Near the elevators, Calder Voss, 31, Ronan's younger brother and the quietest member of the Voss family, watched the exchange with uneasy eyes. He looked like he wanted to say something, but as usual, he said nothing. Later, in a private conference room, Briony Hale, 42, Malin's attorney and the legal advisor for Silverkey Holdings, placed a sealed folder on the table. "The executive confirmation package is ready," Briony said. "If Auric tries to push Ronan through without proper board approval, Silverkey can stop it legally." Malin looked through the glass wall at Ronan, speaking to staff like the building already belonged to him. "I don't want to stop my husband," she said. "I want him to prove he deserves the room." Briony studied her carefully. "And if he proves the opposite?" Malin did not answer. When she stepped out minutes later, she saw Ronan near the elevator with Vesa Rook, 33, Horizon Veilworks, executive image strategist and the consultant shaping Ronan's promotion night image. Vesa was adjusting Ronan's tie. Her hand rested too long against his chest. When Malin came closer, Vesa removed her hand slowly, almost like she wanted Malin to notice. Ronan smiled too quickly. "Vesa, just helping with tonight's executive image." Malin looked at Vesa's earrings, then at Ronan's cufflinks. Both were the same deep blue enamel. A small detail. A quiet detail. But Malin had built her life by noticing what others ignored. That afternoon, she found the printed seating draft for the promotion dinner on the edge of a copier tray. Her name was not beside Ronan. Vesa was. At the bottom of the page, written in Vesa's sharp handwriting, was one sentence. "Make the transition visible. People need to see who belongs beside him now." Malin folded the paper slowly. She did not cry, but something inside her became very still. And by nightfall, that stillness would be the only warning Ronan never understood. Malin heard her husband say the words before she saw his face. "After tonight, she'll have no reason to stay attached to my name." The sentence cut through the hallway like a blade. Malin stood outside the private strategy room at Horizon Veilworks, holding the revised speech cards Ronan had asked her to fix. Around her, staff moved quickly through the late afternoon rush. Floral arrangements were being carried toward the banquet hall. Framed photos of Auric and Ronan were being polished for the promotion celebration. Large screens were being tested with Ronan's name glowing beneath the company logo. Everything looked beautiful. Everything felt wrong. Inside the room, Vessa's voice answered him. Then don't just leave her, replace her publicly. If people see me beside you tonight, they'll understand the future before she can explain the past. Maylin's fingers tightened around the speech cards. For 1 second, her mind refused to understand what her ears had heard. Then she moved closer to the door, just enough to see through the narrow gap. Ronan stood with his back partly turned. Vessa stood in front of him, close enough that no professional reason could explain it. Her hand rested on his jacket, right above his heart. Ronan did not step away. Then he bent his head and kissed her. It was not a mistake. It was not panic. It was not a brief touch that could be excused later with confusion and lies. It was slow, familiar, and practiced. The kind of kiss that told Maylin this betrayal had not begun today. Her chest tightened so sharply she almost reached for the wall. But she did not open the door. She did not scream. She did not give them the pleasure of watching her break. Instead, Maylin quietly placed Ronan's speech cards on a side table near the door, the same speech she had corrected for him, the same speech that would make him sound wiser than he was, the same speech he would use tonight while planning to erase her. She turned and walked away. Her steps were steady, but inside, memories were falling apart. Years ago, in their first year of marriage, Ronan had stood outside a small investor dinner with his hands shaking. He had been terrified that Auric would call him useless again if he failed. Maylin had held both his hands and made him breathe slowly. She had rehearsed every answer with him in a quiet hallway, fixing his words, calming his fear, building his confidence piece by piece. That night, when the investors loved him, Ronan had found her behind the curtains and whispered, "One day, when I'm running this place, everyone will know what you did for me." Now he was preparing to sit beside another woman at the very table Maylin had helped him reach. As Maylin neared the elevators, she heard another conversation around the corner. Isolde Vos, 61, Ronan's mother and Auric's wife, was the polished social matriarch of the Vos family and one of Maylin's coldest critics. Her voice was calm but cruel. "Ronan should have done this months ago," Isolde said. "Maylin never fit this family." Auric answered in a low voice, "Tonight must not turn messy. The board needs confidence before tomorrow's confirmation." "Then let Vessa sit where a future wife should sit," Isolde said. "People understand what they see." Maylin stopped again. The pain changed shape. It was no longer only an affair. It was not only Ronan losing control of his vows. His family knew. His mother approved. His father cared more about board confidence than his daughter-in-law's dignity. This was not betrayal by one man. It was a coordinated removal. Maylin entered the stairwell and closed the door behind her. The music from the banquet hall tests became muffled. For the first time, her breath shook. She pulled out her phone and called Briony. When Briony answered, Maylin did not say, "He is cheating." She swallowed the words because they sounded too small for what she had just seen. Instead, she asked, "If a senior executive candidate is romantically involved with a company consultant who worked on his promotion materials, what does that create?" Briony went silent for a moment. "Conflict of interest," she said, "possible misuse of company resources, possible ethics violation, possible board deception if the relationship affected his confirmation materials." "Why?" Maylin closed her eyes. Behind her eyelids, she saw Ronan kissing Vessa. She saw Isolde calmly replacing her before the night had even begun. "Because I need to stop thinking like a wife for 5 minutes," Maylin said. Briony's voice softened but stayed firm. "Then start thinking like the controlling shareholder." The words landed heavily. Maylin leaned against the stairwell wall. She had hidden that part of herself for years. The Silverkey acquisition documents were confidential under the restructuring agreement. Legally, her control was protected behind holding structures and trustee filings. Emotionally, she had wanted it that way. She had never wanted Ronan to bow to her money. She had wanted him to stand beside her heart. "I never wanted him to know because of power," Malin said quietly. "I wanted to know if he loved me without it." Briony answered, "Then tonight may tell you which one he valued." Malin opened her eyes. Outside the stairwell, the company was still preparing for Ronan's celebration. People were hanging lights, moving chairs, testing microphones. No one knew the woman walking past them owned the authority behind the walls. And no one knew she had just watched her marriage become evidence. When Malin returned to the executive floor, Nell Croft, 29, Ronan's executive assistant and the staff member managing the promotion night logistics, hurried toward her with nervous eyes. "Mrs. Voss," Nell whispered, "I probably shouldn't say this, but Ms. Rook requested security keep you away from the backstage entrance tonight. She said it was Mr. Voss's instruction." Malin's face did not change. "Did Ronan confirm that?" Nell looked down. "He signed the event memo." For a moment, the hallway seemed to narrow around Malin. It was not enough that Ronan had kissed Vesa. It was not enough that his family had planned her replacement. He had signed the order that would physically keep his own wife away from the place where he would be celebrated. Malin nodded once. "Send a copy of the signed memo to Briony." Nell's eyes widened. "Mrs. Voss, you did nothing wrong by telling the truth," Malin said, "but if this becomes a governance matter, memory will not be enough. Documents will." Nell swallowed. "Yes, ma'am." A few minutes later, Malin entered the private conference room where Briony waited. Rain blurred the glass wall behind her. Beyond it, Ronan and Vesa stood near the elevator, laughing together as if nothing in the world could touch them. Briony placed a sealed folder on the table. Across the front were the words, "Emergency Executive Authority, Silver Key Holdings." Briony looked at Malin carefully. "Do you want me at the dinner?" Malin watched Ronan lift his hand to Vesa's back, watched Vesa lean into the touch, watched the man she had protected behave like he had already buried her. Then Malin looked down at the sealed folder. "No," she said softly, "I want you nearby." Briony understood. "Nearby for tonight, ready for morning." Malin nodded. Outside the glass, Vesa smiled like a woman who believed the night had already been won. She did not know morning had just been invited. The first wound came before Malin even reached the table. Her name was not beside her husband's. It sat at the far end of the family section, almost hidden behind a tall vase of white flowers. Beside Ronan's chair, printed in sharp black letters on thick gold-edged card, was another name. Vesa Rook. For a moment, the whole banquet hall seemed to tilt. Gold light poured over champagne towers. Black tablecloths shone under crystal glasses. On the screen behind the small stage, Ronan's name glowed beneath the company logo. A large banner stretched across the wall. Horizon Veilworks Executive Leadership Celebration. People laughed softly, forks touched plates, cameras flashed near the stage. Everything looked expensive, controlled, and beautiful. Only Malin knew the room had been arranged like a knife. She stood in her silver-gray dress, graceful but guarded, holding her small clutch with both hands. She could feel eyes on her, company executives, board members, family friends, event staff pretending not to watch. Iran J, 58, a senior board member at Horizon Veilworks and one of the few directors who knew Silver Key Holdings had final approval authority, glanced from the seating chart to Malin. His face tightened, but he said nothing. Before Malin could move, Vesa appeared beside her. "I hope you don't mind the seating," Vesa said with a soft smile. Ronan wanted the table to reflect his next chapter. Malin looked at her calmly. People who need seating charts to prove belonging usually know they don't belong. Vessa's smile tightened for half a second. Then Ronan appeared, dressed in a perfect black suit, wearing the deep blue cufflinks Malin had noticed earlier. He looked at the two women, then at the nearby guests who had slowed down to listen. Instead of defending his wife, he sighed. "Not tonight, Malin. Don't make this about your feelings." The sentence landed harder because he said it gently, like he was being reasonable. A few guests looked away. One event server lowered her eyes. Malin felt heat crawl up her neck, but she did not move. Ronan had just made her pain look like bad manners. So she walked to the far end of the table and sat alone. From there, she could see everything. Ronan laughing beside Vessa. Isolde sitting straight-backed with satisfaction in her eyes. Auric pretending to study the program. Calder looking down at his untouched glass. The music softened, a spotlight found Ronan. He stepped onto the small stage. Applause filled the room. Malin's heart twisted as he lifted the speech cards she had corrected that morning. Her words were in his hands. Her care was in his voice before he even spoke. "Leadership is not inherited," Ronan began. "It is proven, and tonight I am proud to step toward the future my father prepared for me." The room clapped again. Malin stayed still. He thanked Auric for building the company. He thanked Isolde for teaching him standards. He thanked the board for trusting his vision. He thanked the executives for believing in a new chapter. Then he paused. For one foolish second, Malin's eyes softened. She remembered their first year of marriage, when Ronan had been too nervous to face a room of investors. She had stood with him in a hallway, holding his shaking hands, whispering answers until he could breathe again. Afterward, he had promised that one day everyone would know what she had done for him. Now everyone was watching. Ronan turned slightly, but he did not look at Malin. He looked at Vessa. "And I want to thank the woman who helped me see that ambition should never apologize for outgrowing comfort." The air changed. Vessa rose slowly, like she had practiced the moment. Isolde lifted her glass first. Auric followed, though his face had gone stiff. Calder hesitated until Isolde's sharp glance forced his hand upward. Then the room joined them. Glasses rose across the hall. "To Ronan," Vessa said, smiling as if she had already won. "To a man brave enough to choose his future." Malin sat at the end of the table while her husband, his mistress, and his family toasted her replacement. No one stopped it. That was the part that hurt most. Not the kiss she had seen, not the seating chart, not even Vessa's smile. It was the silence of people who had eaten at Malin's table, accepted her kindness, and now watched her be erased under golden lights. After the toast, Ronan stepped down from the stage and walked toward her. In his hand was a cream envelope. The room quieted in pieces, like people could smell scandal before it arrived. Ronan placed the envelope beside Malin's plate. "Open it." Malin looked up at him. "Here." Everyone should understand what tonight means. Her fingers did not shake when she opened it. But something deep inside her went cold. Divorce papers. Already signed by Ronan. The petition had not yet been filed with the court. It was a legal draft prepared for her signature, dressed up as a public punishment. The reason stated in clean legal language: incompatible public futures and lack of shared ambition. Malin almost smiled from the pain of it. Those were not Ronan's words. They sounded like branding, like Vessa, like a woman who wanted a wife removed the same way a company removed an old logo. Malin looked at Ronan. "Did you choose tonight because you wanted freedom or because you wanted witnesses?" Ronan's jaw tightened. "I wanted clarity." Malin looked at Vessa, then at Isolde, Auric, Calder, the watching guests. "No," she said softly, "you wanted an audience." Vesa stepped closer. Some women are made to support powerful men from the background. Others are made to stand beside them. Malin turned to her. Then make sure he is actually powerful before you build your life beside him. The room went quiet. For the first time that night, Vesa's expression faltered. Ronan laughed coldly, trying to take back control. You still don't understand, do you? Tomorrow I sit in my first executive confirmation meeting. By noon, I decide what your life looks like. Malin did not correct him. She let him stand there in his expensive suit, under the company logo, believing she was small. Near the back of the room, Briony Hale entered quietly and spoke to Iron J. Oryx saw her and stiffened. Vesa noticed Oryx's reaction, and uncertainty crossed her face like a shadow. Malin removed her wedding ring and placed it beside the unsigned divorce papers. I won't sign anything at your celebration, she said. Some documents deserve witnesses, others deserve attorneys. Ronan smirked. Bring anyone you want. Tomorrow you'll learn how powerless you are. Malin stood. At the doorway, she turned back. No, Ronan, tomorrow morning you will. Then she walked out, leaving the ring, the papers, and the first quiet warning on the table. The banquet doors closed behind Malin, but the applause still followed her. It came through the walls in soft waves, mixed with music, laughter, and the bright sound of champagne glasses touching. Behind those doors, Ronan was still being celebrated. Vesa was probably still smiling beside him. The Voss family was still pretending nothing cruel had happened. Malin walked down the empty hallway with her wedding ring no longer on her finger. The rain outside streaked the tall windows like the building itself was trying not to cry. She did not run, she did not cover her face, she did not collapse where anyone could see her. Her heels struck the polished floor with quiet, steady sounds, each step carrying her farther from the woman who had sat at the end of that table and waited for one person to defend her. No one had. At the corner, Calder stood near the wall, pale and uneasy. He looked as if he had followed her, but lost his courage halfway. Malin, he said softly. She stopped, but did not turn fully. I'm sorry. For a moment, the words hung between them. Malin looked at him with tired eyes. You were sorry with a glass in your hand. Calder looked down. She did not wait for an answer. Some silences were apologies. Others were proof. Malin continued toward a small private office, the venue used for legal and executive guests. Briony was already inside, standing beside a narrow table with a black folder open in front of her. The room was dim, lit only by a desk lamp and the silver rain pressing against the window. The moment Briony shut the door, Malin's face finally broke. Not loudly, not dramatically. Her shoulders did not shake. She simply pressed one hand against the table and let the pain show. I saved his father from disgrace, Malin whispered. I saved his company, I saved his name, and he thanked her for teaching him ambition. Briony did not rush to comfort her with empty words. She let the truth breathe. Then she said, then stop saving them. Malin closed her eyes. Those 4 words landed deeper than the divorce papers. For years, she had protected Ronan from the weight of who his father really was. She had protected Oryx from the shame of losing control. She had protected the employees from panic, the board from scandal, the family from collapse. And in return, they had turned her kindness into a chair at the far end of the table. Briony turned the black folder toward her. I did not prepare this because I wanted to hurt your husband, she said. I prepared it because risk has been building for months. Inside the file were documents arranged with painful care. Ronan's executive confirmation memo. Vesa's consulting contract. Company expense reports. Event seating instructions. A copy of Ronan's speech draft. Emails showing Vesa had influenced executive transition messaging. Records showing company funds had paid for private trips disguised as branding meetings. A copy of the backstage restriction memo Ronan had signed. Malin stared at the papers. They were cold, clean, and legal, nothing like the hot shame that had filled the banquet hall. Brioni tapped the file once. This is not about adultery. That belongs in divorce court. This is about executive misconduct, conflict of interest, misuse of company funds, and board deception. Malin swallowed. That mattered. She knew it mattered. She could not destroy Ronan because he broke her heart. She could not ruin Vesa because she had taken a place beside him. But if they had used company money, company authority, and company systems to build their lie, then the company had the right to answer. And Malin had the authority to make it answer. Her mind pulled her backward 5 years. She saw Auric in a private room at Silverkey Holdings, no gold lights, no family pride, no chairman's smile. He had looked smaller then. His tie had been loose. His hands had trembled over the documents. If this company collapses, Auric had said, my family name dies with it. Malin had been younger, softer, still believing mercy could change people. Silverkey rescued Orison Vale Works under strict conditions. Auric could remain public chairman for stability, but only temporarily. Major executive appointments needed Silverkey approval. Any family member entering leadership required formal ethics review. Hidden liabilities had to be disclosed to Silverkey's legal team. Auric had signed every page. Then he had looked at Malin and said, Ronan can never know I lost control. Malin had agreed because she loved Ronan. Because she thought protecting his father's dignity might protect Ronan's heart. Now she understood. Some secrets did not protect people. They fed their arrogance. A knock struck the office door. Before Brioni could answer, Auric stepped inside. His face was tight. His eyes moved first to the file, then to Malin. He looked afraid, but still proud enough to hide it poorly. Malin, he said in a low voice, whatever you think happened tonight, do not embarrass this family. Malin looked at him. You watched your son embarrass me with the company's logo behind him. Auric's mouth tightened. Ronan doesn't know. No, Malin said, but you did. The words struck him harder than shouting would have. Behind him, the banquet music rose for a moment as someone opened the distant hall doors. Malin heard Ronan's laugh, then Vesa's voice, faint but sharp. Who was that attorney? Ronan answered, careless and amused. Probably some divorce lawyer. Let her perform. Vesa's voice dropped. Your father looked afraid. My father controls this company, Ronan said. The hallway went quiet again. Malin looked at Auric. Auric looked away. Brioni picked up her phone. Hale Norrin, 48, the security director of Orison Vale Works and the man responsible for executive access and internal building privileges, answered on the second ring. Brioni's voice became formal. Effective 7:00 a.m., freeze all pending executive privilege expansions for Ronan Vos until board review is complete. His standard employee access remains active only for the boardroom level. There was a pause. Then Hale replied, understood. Malin looked at the rain sliding down the window. And make sure his badge still opens the boardroom, she said softly. Brioni turned to her. Malin's face was calm now, but the softness in it had changed into something steadier. I want him there, she said, when he learns what power actually means. Auric stared at her. You would do this to Ronan. Malin looked back at him. No, Ronan did this. I am only done hiding the consequences. Outside the office, the celebration continued as if morning would never come. But in the dark glass of the window, Malin could already see the first shape of dawn. Ronan's badge flashed red. The sound was small, only one sharp beep at the elevator gate. but it cut through the bright lobby of Horizon Valeworks like a public slap. People stopped pretending not to watch. Ronan stood in front of the executive elevator wearing the new silver leadership pin Auric had given him the night before. His suit was pressed. His jaw was clean-shaven. His smile had been ready for applause. Beside him, Vesa stood in a cream blazer, dressed like she already belonged on the executive floor. But the elevator panel did not open to the private suite. Only one button lit up. Boardroom level. Ronan frowned and scanned his badge again. Red. He scanned it a third time, harder, as if the machine could be intimidated. Red. Hale Norrin stood near the security desk with his hands folded in front of him. His face showed no disrespect, but no fear either. Ronan turned to him. Executive floor, full access starts today. Hale nodded once. Your access is under review, sir. The lobby grew quieter. Vesa's smile faded first. Ronan gave a short laugh, the kind of laugh men used when they were angry but still wanted witnesses to think they were calm. There must be a system error. No system error, sir, Hale said. You are expected in the boardroom. Ronan looked around and noticed the whispers. Two assistants near the reception desk turned away too quickly. A junior manager lowered his eyes. Nell Croft stood beside a stack of event files, her face pale with the kind of knowledge she wished she did not have. Vesa stepped closer to Ronan and whispered, "Call your father." Ronan's eyes narrowed. "I don't need to call anyone in my own company." But his hand was already reaching for his phone. He called Auric. No answer. He called again. No answer. For the first time that morning, Ronan's confidence slipped just enough for Vesa to see it. She leaned in. Why is he not answering? Ronan forced a smile. Because he's probably already upstairs fixing this. But he knew Auric always answered on important mornings. Especially this morning. Especially the morning his son was supposed to become the future of the company. The elevator opened. Ronan stepped inside with Vesa, but the silence followed them in. As the doors closed, he saw employees watching him the way people watched a glass falling from a table before it shattered. On another floor, behind a closed conference room door, Brioni had already begun. Several board members sat around a polished table with tablets, folders, and tired faces. The celebration from the night before had become evidence by sunrise. Brioni laid the documents out one by one. Vesa's consulting invoices. Travel expenses tied to Ronan. Email edits where Vesa had changed Ronan's promotion messaging. Event documents showing Malin was intentionally seated away from her own husband. The signed backstage restriction memo. A private communication from Vesa that read, "Once Malin is publicly displaced, Ronan's executive image becomes cleaner." Brioni let the room sit with the sentence. Then she said, "This is not a marital issue. This is a governance issue." Iran J looked down at the printed email and exhaled slowly. Another board member asked, "Does Silverkey intend to block the confirmation?" Brioni's answer was calm. Silverkey intends to review whether there was misconduct before any executive authority is granted. That was the legal line. No shouting. No revenge speech. No emotional attack. Just procedure. Just power used correctly. Down the hall, Malin stood alone in the boardroom before anyone entered. The room was cold and beautiful. Glass walls, long table, city grey morning beyond the windows. At the head of the table sat the chair Ronan believed was waiting for him. Malin placed one hand on the back of it. She remembered him the day before, looking at his reflection and saying, "Tonight isn't about feelings, it's about power." The memory did not make her smile. It hurt. Because beneath everything Ronan had done, she could still remember the man who once feared disappointing his father. She remembered the young husband who had rested his head in her lap after hard meetings and whispered that he was tired of being measured by Oryx's pride. She remembered believing that if she loved him patiently enough, he might become kinder than the house that raised him. Instead, he had become louder, crueler, hungrier. Malin pulled the chair back but did not sit yet. Her eyes moved to the empty chairman's seat where Oryx usually performed power for the room. Today, it was deliberately left empty. That emptiness said what no one had spoken yet. The old order was already over. The boardroom door opened. Isolde walked in first, dressed in black, her pearls bright against her throat. She stopped when she saw Malin standing beside the head chair. Her lips curved with cold disbelief. "You shouldn't be here," Isolde said. "Whatever little divorce attorney you hired, this is not the place for a wife's tantrum." Malin looked at her without anger. "Then it is fortunate I did not come as a wife." Isolde's expression changed. Only slightly. "Enough." Before she could ask what Malin meant, Briony opened the door wider and entered with the audit folders in her arms. "Mrs. Voss," Briony said, "the board is ready." Isolde looked from Briony to Malin, and for the first time, the sharp certainty in her face weakened. A moment later, the elevator doors opened down the hall. Ronan arrived laughing too loudly, with Vesa beside him and Oryx behind them. Oryx's face looked older than it had the night before. He did not look at Malin. He did not look at Ronan either. Ronan pushed into the boardroom like a man trying to outrun fear. "Good," he said. "Everyone's here. Let's make this official." Then he saw Malin. She was seated at the head of the table. Briony stood beside her. The chairman's seat was empty. In front of Malin sat a folder marked Silver Key Holdings, Majority Control Authority. Ronan stopped. His smile died slowly. "Why is she sitting there?" No one answered at first. The silence was worse than any insult. Briony closed the boardroom door. Because this meeting was called by the controlling owner of Oryxen Valeworks. Ronan turned to his father. Oryx could not look at him. Vesa's hand slipped away from Ronan's arm. Malin looked directly at the husband who had served her divorce papers under the company logo. "Last night you toasted your mistress with the family who helped erase me," she said. "This morning I decide whether you have a future in the company you thought was yours." And in that silence, Ronan finally heard the first crack in the kingdom he thought belonged to him. "This is ridiculous." Ronan's voice cracked through the glass-walled boardroom before anyone else could speak. He stood near the doorway, one hand still close to Vesa's chair, his face twisted between anger and disbelief. Behind him, the city skyline looked pale under the morning clouds. Inside the room, no one smiled, no one clapped, no one rose to greet him like the confirmed executive he believed he had become. Malin sat at the head of the table. In front of her was a black folder marked Silver Key Holdings, Majority Control Authority. Ronan looked from the folder to Malin and laughed, but the sound was too sharp to be real. "Malin doesn't own anything here," he said. "She doesn't even know how this company runs." The insult floated across the table. Malin did not flinch. That was what made Ronan angrier. Briony stepped forward with a stack of documents in her hands. Her voice stayed calm. 5 years ago, during Oryxen Valeworks debt restructuring, Silver Key Holdings acquired controlling voting interest in the company. Mrs. Malin Voss inherited Silver Key Holdings and currently holds majority control authority over executive appointments, emergency financing, and governance review. The room stayed silent. Ronan's eyes jumped to Oryx. "Dad." Auric sat 2 chairs away from the empty chairman's seat. His shoulders were stiff. His mouth opened once, but no sound came out. That silence answered everything. Ronan's face changed slowly. First confusion, then panic, then rage trying to dress itself as pride. "No," he said. "No, that's not possible. You told me the family still controlled it." Auric looked down at the table. Vesa slowly removed her hand from Ronan's arm. That small movement hurt him more than he expected. Last night, she had stood beside him like a queen beside a king. Now, before the first real blow had even landed, she was already stepping away from the throne. Malin finally spoke. "Last night, you told a room full of people I had no place in your future. This morning, I am here to determine whether you have a future in this company." Ronan stared at her. For the first time since she had known him, he did not have a quick answer. Brioni began placing documents in front of the board members. "The executive confirmation scheduled for this morning is suspended pending review," she said. "Mr. Voss's promotion title was announced publicly last night, but it was never finalized by the board. His pending access to executive systems remains frozen. His expense account is under audit. Ms. Rook's consulting contract is suspended pending investigation. Mr. Auric Voss's continued role as public chairman is also under governance review." Isolde inhaled sharply. Ronan slammed one palm on the table. "You can't do this because I left you." Malin looked at him with a sadness that made the room feel colder. "No," she said. "I can do this because you used company resources, company events, and company authority to deceive the board and humiliate the controlling shareholder." His face reddened. "That dinner was personal." Brioni opened another folder. The dinner was paid through a corporate leadership event account. The seating chart was handled by company staff. The backstage restriction memo was signed under company authority. The promotion speech was prepared as part of executive transition materials. Ms. Rook's consulting work was charged to Horizon Veilworks. Vesa sat straighter. "This is a personal attack." Brioni turned a printed email toward her. "This message was sent from your company consulting account 3 days ago." The room waited. Brioni read it aloud. "Ronan must appear unmarried in spirit before the board sees him as independent." Vesa went pale. Brioni placed a second document beside it. "And these are hotel charges filed under leadership image sessions. The dates match private travel involving you and Mr. Voss." Ronan turned to Vesa. "You said those were handled." Vesa whispered, "You approved them." That one sentence cracked their alliance in front of everyone. Malin watched them, but no satisfaction came, only a deep tiredness. She remembered another boardroom years ago, smaller and darker, with Auric sitting across from her as a desperate man instead of a proud chairman. He had begged her not to expose the debt. He had begged her not to tell Ronan he had lost control of the company. Malin had believed Mercy could protect the family long enough for them to become better. She had told Auric then, "I will not punish your son for your mistakes." Now she understood the difference. Ronan was not being punished for Auric's mistakes. He was being held responsible for his own. Ronan pushed back from the table. "You hid this from me," he said, pointing at Malin. "You lied." The words struck her, but not because they were true. They hurt because he still thought the worst part was that she had power, not that he had abused love when he believed she had none. Malin's voice softened. "I hid power from you because I wanted to know what you would do with love." No one moved. Even Isolde looked away. Ronan opened his mouth, but nothing came out. At the side door, Hale Norrin entered with a tablet in his hand. Nell stood just behind him, holding a file against her chest, her eyes lowered. Hale looked at Ronan with professional distance. Mr. Voss, your executive office access has been suspended pending investigation. Ronan blinked. My office. Malin looked at the silver pin on his jacket, the one he had worn into the lobby like a crown. It was never yours, she said. It was pending approval. The red light on Hale's tablet reflected faintly against the glass wall. And somewhere beyond the boardroom doors, the first locks of Ronan's old life began to close. The first invoice made the room go silent. It was not large enough to shock the whole company by itself, but it was ugly enough to open the door to everything else. A private hotel charge, a weekend travel fee, a leadership image session that had no meeting notes, no staff list, no report, and no reason to exist except to hide Ronan and Vessa's affair inside company money. Malin sat at the end of the audit conference room, hands folded, face calm. Across from her, Brioni placed another document on the table. Then another. Then another. The lie was no longer one lie. It was a system. Thorne Pell, 55, the head of the board audit committee and the director responsible for reviewing executive misconduct, adjusted his glasses and looked at the papers with a hard expression. So Mr. Voss approved these invoices himself. Brioni nodded. Yes, and Ms. Rook submitted them through her consulting account. Ronan sat 2 chairs away, his face tight with anger. Vessa sat near the wall, trying to look offended instead of afraid. Oryx stared at the table. Isolde kept her chin lifted, but the color had left her face. The investigation had moved fast because the evidence had already been waiting. Brioni had not needed revenge to create it. Ronan and Vessa had created it themselves. In the next folder were email edits where Vessa had shaped Ronan's promotion message. In another were event documents showing Malin had been placed far from Ronan on purpose. Then came the draft announcement that called Ronan incoming executive leader before the board had approved anything. Brioni looked at the audit committee. Mr. Voss's promotion was being treated as confirmed before legal approval. That alone is a governance issue, but combined with the consultant relationship, the expense pattern, and the deliberate exclusion of the controlling shareholder from a corporate event, this becomes far more serious. Ronan leaned forward. You keep saying controlling shareholder-like. That makes humiliating me legal. Malin looked at him. No one is humiliating you, Ronan. We are reading what you signed. That quiet answer struck harder than anger. The review continued in pieces across the building. In the records archive, Nell helped pull event memos, vendor approvals, seating drafts, and access notes. Her hands shook each time she found Malin's name moved farther from Ronan's table. In the break room, employees whispered over coffee, not because anyone had told them everything, but because people always felt when power was shifting. In the HR office, Kestrel Danvers, 49, the Human Resources Director at Horizon Vale Works, and the officer responsible for workplace conduct investigations, sat across from Vessa with a neutral expression. Vessa folded her hands neatly. Ronan pursued me, she said. I only advised him professionally. Brioni slid 2 invoices across the desk. Then explain why private travel was billed as leadership image development. Vessa's eyes flickered. Brioni placed an email beside the invoices. And explain why you wrote that Ronan needed to appear unmarried in spirit before the board could see him as independent. Vessa's mouth opened, but no answer came. For the first time since Malin had seen her beside Ronan, Vessa looked small. Not humble, just drabbled. Down the executive hallway, Malin walked alone for a moment. She passed the office Ronan believed would become his. Hale Norrin stood nearby while a maintenance worker removed the temporary nameplate from the glass door. RONAN VOSS, Executive Strategy. The letters came off one by one. Malin stopped. In the reflection of the glass, she saw herself standing in the same hallway where she had once brought flowers before Ronan's first management role. Back then, she had placed them on his desk before he arrived. He had texted her a photo later and written, "You always know how to make me feel like I belong." She had loved that message. Now the office was empty. The flowers were gone. The man she had tried to build up had used every gift as proof that he stood taller alone. Malin touched the glass lightly. "I wanted you to become better than this," she whispered. Behind her, Calder approached slowly. He looked exhausted, as if guilt had kept him awake all night. "I should have said something," he said. Malin turned. "Yes, you should have." He flinched, but he did not defend himself. "I heard Vesa and Mom talking before the dinner," he said. "They were laughing about the seating chart. I thought if I said anything, Ronan would turn on me too." Malin's eyes softened, but only slightly. "So you let them turn on me instead?" Calder looked down and reached into his pocket. "I have something." He gave her his phone. "I was testing the event playlist in the side room. I didn't know it was still recording after I left it there." Briony joined them as Calder played the memo. Vesa's voice came through first, clear enough to cut. "Once Malin is embarrassed enough, she'll sign anything." Then Isolde's voice followed. "Good, Ronan needs a clean beginning." Malin closed her eyes for 1 second. It was one thing to know they had planned it. It was another to hear how easily they had discussed breaking her. Briony took the phone carefully. "This supports intent," she said. "It also supports the argument that the corporate event was used to pressure you into signing a private legal document." In the next hour, the family began to turn on itself. Isolde stormed into the audit hallway and demanded Malin stop the review. "You are making this company look unstable," she snapped. Malin faced her calmly. "Last night you asked me not to make Ronan's night ugly. Today I am asking you not to make this company's recovery harder." Isolde stared at her, stunned by the authority in her voice. Auric tried a quieter route. He pulled Briony aside and asked whether they could handle this within the family. Briony opened the restructuring agreement and pointed to his signature. "You knew Silverkey had approval authority over executive appointments," she said. "You signed the ethics conditions yourself." Auric looked at the page like it had aged him 10 years. The lie he had fed Ronan was no longer private shame. It was documented history. Then Ronan appeared at the end of the hallway. His tie was loose now, his leadership pin was gone, the anger on his face looked desperate. "You planned this from the beginning," he said. Malin turned to him. "No, I prepared for truth. You chose the timing." Before Ronan could answer, Nell rushed toward them with a tablet pressed to her chest. "Mrs. Voss," she said, breathless, "there's a problem." Malin took the tablet. On the screen was a video from the banquet hall. Ronan raising a glass to Vesa. Malin sitting alone. The divorce papers beside her plate. The company logo glowing behind them. Nell's voice dropped. Someone leaked the clip from last night's toast. Malin watched the video begin to spread. And this time, the whole world was about to see what Ronan thought power looked like. By 10:17 that morning, Ronan's humiliation of Malin was on every screen inside Orizon Valeworks. Phones rang without stopping in the public relations room. Message alerts flashed across laptops. Employees stood frozen in doorways with their hands over their mouths. On the largest wall screen, the leaked video kept replaying. Ronan stood under the gold lights of the banquet hall, raising a glass to Vesa. Malin sat alone at the far end of the table. The divorce papers lay beside her plate. Behind them, glowing bright and clear, was the company logo. The same logo Ronan had wanted behind him when he stepped into power, was now behind him while the world watched him break his wife in public. No one spoke for several seconds. Then the room exploded into motion. Tavian Mero, 41, the public relations director of Horizon Vale Works and the person responsible for protecting the company's public image, stood near the main screen with a phone in one hand and 3 printed statements in the other. "We need a response," Tavian said. "Staff are sharing it. Vendors are asking questions. 2 board members already received calls. This is moving outside the building." Ronan stood near the back of the PR room, pale with fury. "Take it down," he snapped. Tavian looked at him carefully. "We don't control the original post." "Then find who posted it." Brioni, standing beside Malin, answered before Tavian could. "That will be reviewed, but the first issue is not who showed the video. It is what the video shows." Ronan turned on her. "This is a private matter." The clip played again behind him. His own voice filled the room, thanking Vesa for helping him outgrow comfort. Malin did not look at the screen. She already remembered every second. She remembered the way the glass felt in her hand. She remembered the envelope beside her plate. She remembered waiting for one person to say, "Enough." No one had. Now the silence that had protected Ronan was gone. Across the company, employees watched the clip in break rooms, hallways, and offices. Some had known Malin only as Ronan's quiet wife. Others remembered more. They remembered her visiting a warehouse supervisor after surgery. They remembered her sitting with payroll when a system error almost delayed wages. They remembered her asking about sick parents, broken cars, school fees, and overtime schedules. They remembered Ronan giving speeches. They remembered Malin solving problems. In the PR room, Tavian lowered his voice. "The company has to separate itself from the divorce, but we cannot ignore the corporate event, the logo, or the executive title issue." Brioni nodded. "The company will not discuss private divorce matters, but it can confirm that executive appointments are subject to ethics and governance review." Malin finally looked up. "And include that no employee, executive candidate, board member, or consultant is above governance standards." The room quieted. It was not a threat. She did not raise her voice. She did not insult Ronan. She simply placed the truth where everyone could see it. That was what made Ronan look suddenly powerless. Vesa stood near the windows, her arms folded tightly. Her confidence from the banquet hall had drained from her face. She stepped into the corridor and called Ronan's phone. He answered from across the room, turning away from everyone. "You told me your father controlled everything," Vesa hissed. "He does," Ronan said, though his voice was weaker now. "No, Ronan," Vesa snapped. "Your wife does." The words cut through him. Vesa looked through the glass wall at Malin. For the first time, there was no mockery in her eyes. Only fear. "I'm resigning," Vesa said. "I'm not going down for your family's lies." Ronan stared at her. "You said you believed in me." Vesa's mouth tightened. "I believed in the position." Before she could leave, Brioni stepped into the hall. "Ms. Rook, you may resign from future work," Brioni said, "but resignation will not erase the contract review, the billing records, or any civil claims connected to false expenses." Vesa stopped. The door she tried to escape through had already closed. Inside another conference room, the Voss family began to turn on itself. Isolde blamed Auric for hiding the truth about Silverkey. Auric blamed Ronan for making the affair public. Ronan blamed Malin for setting a trap. No one blamed the cruelty. No one blamed the lie. No one blamed the toast. Calder stood beside Malin near the doorway, watching his family collapse into panic. "They only loved power," he said quietly. when they thought it belonged to them. Malin did not answer at first. His words pulled her into an old memory. Years earlier, at a company picnic, employees had crowded around Ronan to thank him for restoring benefits after a bad quarter. Children ran between folding tables. Music played from a small speaker. Ronan smiled as people shook his hand. But Malin had been the one who authorized the emergency reserve funds through Silverkey. She had stood in the background near the lemonade table, watching Ronan accept the applause. At the time, she had felt proud. She had thought love meant not needing credit. Now she understood the danger of giving someone praise they had not earned. She had not only protected Ronan from shame. She had helped him believe every rescue was proof of his greatness. Back in the PR room, the official statement went out. It did not mention betrayal. It did not mention the mistress. It did not mention Malin's heartbreak. It simply said Orison Vale Works had suspended executive confirmation pending an ethics and governance review. Within minutes, Ronan's phone filled with messages. Some from former supporters. Some from business contacts. Some from people who had toasted him the night before and were now suddenly concerned. His image had collapsed faster than his title. Then Brioni entered with a new file in her hand. Her face was calm, but her eyes were sharper than before. The audit found something bigger. Malin turned toward her. Brioni placed the file on the table. Ronan and Vesa were preparing a post-divorce executive image campaign using company funds. It included language portraying you as unstable, dependent, and unsuitable to be associated with future leadership. Malin went still. The room seemed to lose all sound. The betrayal had not been only about replacing her. It had been about destroying the woman they thought would never be able to answer. The board vote was unanimous. No one clapped. No one looked pleased. No one even moved for several seconds after Thorne announced the result. The formal board review room was colder than it had been that morning. There were no flowers, no champagne, no golden lights, no soft music hiding cruel words. Only documents, legal pads, tablets, and silence. Ronan sat without his silver leadership pin. It had been removed before the meeting began because it represented a title he had never legally received. Vesa sat several chairs away from him with Maren Lusk, 45, a corporate defense attorney hired to represent Vesa during the investigation. Vesa did not look at Ronan anymore. Auric looked older, as if one night had drained years from his face. Isolde's chin was still lifted, but the confidence behind it was gone. Malin sat across from them, calm and still. Brioni placed the first review findings on the table. The audit committee has completed its emergency review, Brioni said. The board has accepted the recommendations for immediate action. A separate external review may continue, but these governance decisions are effective now. Ronan leaned forward. Recommendations. His voice was rough now. Not arrogant. Not smooth. Rough. Thorne read from the file. Ronan Voss's executive confirmation is denied. He is removed from all future executive consideration at Orison Vale Works unless a future independent board reverses the restriction. His access to executive accounts remains terminated. He will be removed from the company leadership program. He is required to repay expenses improperly charged through leadership development and image accounts, subject to final audit. Ronan stared at him like the words were in another language. Thorne continued. His public separation from the company's leadership future will be confirmed through an internal statement. Any divorce proceedings involving Mrs. Voss will remain personal, but no company position, future title, or family influence may be used as leverage. Ronan looked at Malin. The meaning hit him slowly. He had served divorce papers because he believed she had nothing. Now even the divorce would not give him power over her. Then Briony turned to Vesa. Veseruk's consulting contract is terminated for cause. She is barred from future work with Orizon Vale Works or any Silver Key-managed company. The board reserves the right to pursue civil action connected to false billing, misclassified expenses, and misleading executive transition materials. Vesa's lips parted. Maren touched her arm, warning her not to speak. But Vesa could not hold it in. "You told me your family controlled the company," she snapped at Ronan. Ronan turned on her, wounded and furious. "You said you believed in me." Vesa's face hardened. "I believed in the position." The words landed like a second vote. Ronan's mouth closed. For the first time, he understood that Vesa had not chosen him over Malin because she saw greatness in him. She had chosen the office, the title, the family name, the future he had promised her with money that was never his and power he had never owned. Oric's turn came next. Thorn read slower this time. Oric Voss is removed as chairman, effective immediately. He may remain as temporary transition advisor for no more than 90 days, under board supervision, only to assist operational continuity. Silver Key Holdings will appoint an independent chair during the transition. Oric closed his eyes. The room had watched his kingdom disappear without a raised voice. Isolde finally spoke. "This is excessive." Malin looked at her. No, excessive was using a corporate celebration to replace a wife with a consultant while the company logo stood behind the cruelty. Isolde looked away. Ronan pushed his chair back. "Malin, we were married. You could have warned me." The room became very still. Malin did not answer quickly. Her eyes moved to his face, and for one painful second, she did not see the man who had laughed beside Vesa. She saw the Ronan from years ago, standing under dim garden lights with a ring in his hand. The night he proposed, his voice had trembled. "I don't care where you come from or what you have," he had said. "I just want you." Back then, she had believed him. Now she understood something that made the memory hurt worse. He had only been able to say that because he thought she had nothing. He had loved the idea of a wife who needed him, admired him, and never stood above him in any room. Malin looked back at the man sitting across from her. "I warned you every time I asked you to be kind." Ronan swallowed. "You let me think I had power." "No," Malin said softly. "I let you show me what you would do when you believed I didn't." That was the sentence that finished him. Not the vote. Not the audit. Not the lost office. That sentence gave shape to everything he had done. He had not been tricked. He had been revealed. Briony placed the board resolution in front of Malin. Then the executive denial order. Then Vesa's contract termination. Then the governance order removing Oric's chair authority. Malin signed each one. Her hand was steady. She did not insult Ronan. She did not smile at Vesa. She did not tell Oric he deserved it. She did not raise her voice because she did not need volume to be heard anymore. Every signature was quiet. Every signature closed a door. When the meeting ended, Hale Norrin stepped forward and collected Ronan's temporary executive materials. Ronan stood slowly, as if his body had become heavier. No one followed him at first. Vesa left with Maren through the side door without looking back. Oric remained seated. Isolde stared at the table. Calder stood near the wall, silent, but this time his silence felt like shame instead of cowardice. Ronan walked into the executive hallway. Employees nearby grew quiet. He reached the elevator and scanned his badge. Red light. Access denied. He scanned it again. Red. The same man who had humiliated his wife in public was now publicly locked out of the floor he had claimed as his future. Malin walked past him. Ronan's voice came out low. Was any of it real? She stopped. For a moment, the hallway held its breath. Then Malin turned just enough to look at him. Mine was. She kept walking. Behind her, Ronan stood before the locked elevator. Ahead of her, the front doors of Horizon Veilworks waited like a life she would finally enter without hiding. The old portrait was gone. For years, Oryx's painted face had watched over the main lobby of Horizon Veilworks like a king watching his court. That morning, the wall behind the reception desk was bare for only a moment before two workers lifted a new framed statement into place. Leadership is responsibility before recognition. Employees gathered in silence. No one had been ordered to stand there. No memo had told them to wait. But when Malin walked through the front entrance for the first time, not the side door, not the quiet hallway, not the hidden route she had used for years, people rose from their desks and turned toward her. Not out of fear, out of respect. Morning light filled the lobby. It touched the glass walls, the polished floor, the faces of employees who now understood what she had done without needing applause. Malin wore a simple ivory suit, no jewels, no dramatic smile. Her strength looked the same as it always had. Quiet, steady, real. Brioni walked beside her with a folder tucked under one arm. Hale stood near the security desk, watching the lobby with professional calm. Kestrel waited with the HR team. Iron J stood with the board members near the elevators, no longer looking at Malin like a secret he had to protect, but like the authority the company should have recognized long ago. For the first time, no one looked past Malin to find a more powerful person. She was the person. In the main auditorium, employees filled every row. Warehouse staff sat beside managers. Finance clerks sat beside board members. Nell stood near the aisle, holding a tablet, her eyes bright with nervous pride. Calder stood near the back, quieter than usual, but this time his silence was not cowardice. It was respect. Malin stepped onto the stage. For a second, the room blurred. She remembered the company picnic years ago when Ronan accepted thanks for benefits she had restored. She remembered standing beside lemonade cups, smiling because she thought love did not need credit. She remembered Oryx begging her to hide his failure. She remembered Ronan raising a glass to Vesa while divorce papers waited beside her plate. Then she looked at the employees. The people who had nearly paid for the Voss family's pride. This company survived, Malin said, because many people worked quietly while others took credit loudly. That ends now. No one moved. Her voice stayed calm. Horizon Veilworks will begin an independent CEO search. Executive appointments will no longer be treated as family inheritance. We are creating stronger ethics rules, transparent leadership standards, and an employee protection fund for staff whose wages and benefits were once endangered by hidden mistakes. A low sound moved through the room. Not cheering yet. Something deeper. Relief. Malin continued. No person in this company is too important to be reviewed, no name is too old to be questioned, and no worker should ever suffer because powerful people are too proud to tell the truth. This time, applause rose slowly. Then stronger. Malin did not cry, but her eyes shone. She had not become champion because she destroyed Ronan. She became champion because she saved what he had only wanted to own. Later that afternoon, in a private legal conference room, Ronan tried one final delay. He sat across from Malin without his executive pin, without Vesa, without Oryx standing behind him. Beside him was Dorian Fell, 50, Ronan's divorce attorney, and the man hired to negotiate after Ronan realized Malin's true wealth and control. Dorian cleared his throat. Mr. Voss believes more time may help both parties reach a fair understanding. Malin looked at Ronan. He looked smaller than he had on promotion night. Not poor, not destroyed beyond life, just stripped of the costume that had made him feel untouchable. I didn't know who you were, Ronan said. Malin's face softened, but only with sadness. That was never the problem. You didn't respect who I was when you thought I was no one. Ronan lowered his eyes. There was nothing left for him to say that would matter. He had lost his promotion, his company future, his mistress, his father's protection, his public image, his access to Malin's quiet wealth. And worst of all, he had lost the belief that status made him better than the woman who had loved him. Malin signed the divorce agreement after Briony confirmed the company matters were separated from the personal settlement. She did not give Ronan a doorway back into her heart. Outside the room, Briony waited. "It's done?" she asked. Malin nodded. "It's done." But one conversation remained. Oric requested it near the old chairman's office, where boxes now sat against the wall. His nameplate had been removed. His portrait was gone. He looked at Malin like a man standing in the ruins of a lie he had built himself. "I was ashamed my son would know I lost control," Oric said. Malin looked at him for a long moment. "So you taught him to worship control instead of character?" Oric had no answer. That was his consequence. Not just losing the chair. Knowing his pride had helped shape Ronan into the kind of man who would humiliate a woman in public and call it strength. By evening, the building grew quiet again. Malin returned alone to the boardroom. On the table were two objects Briony had kept for her. The unsigned divorce papers from promotion night. The wedding ring. Malin stood over them for a long time. Not because she wanted them back. Because she needed one final moment to honor the woman who had worn that ring with hope. Then she placed both into a small envelope. Not because she was weak. Because she was done carrying them. She walked to the window and looked down at Horizon Vale Works, the company she had saved in silence and would now help lead in truth until an independent executive team was in place. Briony entered softly behind her. "Are you ready for the next meeting?" Malin looked at the rising sun, touching the glass. "Yes," she said, "this time I won't sit in the background." And beyond the boardroom doors, a new nameplate waited to be placed where no one could overlook it again. MALIN VOSS. Controlling Shareholder Representative. SILVRQAY Holdings. If this story reminded you that quiet strength is still strength, comment justice before you go.